We eat when we're stressed, we eat when we're bored, we eat when we're upset, we even eat when we're happy. Let's face it, we're emotional beings, and that is why so many people struggle with emotional eating. Hello, and welcome to Living Well with Robin Stoloff, empowering you to live a healthier life. Joining me today is someone who knows all too well about emotional eating. Welcome to Jonathan McClernand. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks
John,
for having me. I love that
Jonathan,
intro.
yes, well, you lost 100 pounds several times, actually. And you know
Yeah,
all
yeah.
about this. And now you are an emotional eating weight loss coach. So thanks so much for joining us, Jonathan.
Yeah, you bet.
So let's rewind a bit and give us your backstory, how you came to be where you were and how you came to be where you are today.
Yeah, and I say like when I graduated high school, a little over 20 years ago, which doesn't sound like that long ago. I never knew what the next 20, if you'd have told me what the next 20 years were going to look like, I would have said you were nuts. But I've had quite this varied background from nanotech researcher to marine engineer in the Navy. I've been a four-time entrepreneur. I've had two failed businesses. I've been a globetrotting English teacher I spent 3 years doing that with my wife. And it was during my travels around the world that I went from being athletic and active to being morbidly obese. And it was as a result of trauma that I'd suffered about 10 years ago while I was living in South Africa. And so that really began my weight loss journey in earnest. So prior to that, I would have probably thought that anyone who was overweight was just lazy or undisciplined because it wasn't something that I struggled with. Like I was pretty active. It was just a part of my life. But after turning to food as like a coping mechanism, because I really didn't have the tools to deal with my trauma, I found myself sort of wading into this murky world of like weight loss and diet culture. And so after, and as you mentioned, I joke that I've lost more like 600 pounds because I lost and gained so much weight repeatedly. And, I say it was really a lot of time and energy wasted on looking for answers in all the wrong places. And so when it was finally, I hired a coach in 2017 that shone a light on the glaring problem that was staring back at me. And that was really my relationship to myself. So because of all of my failed attempts to lose weight, I had really become almost like angry and spiteful towards my body, like as though I felt it had somehow betrayed me. And, it's like I was repeatedly trying to punish it into submission. And so this coach worked with me to really heal my relationship with myself and then by extension, food. And that was this really a seismic paradigm shift that I could actually, treat myself with love and compassion and actually lose weight. So that really dramatically shifted things for me.
I know you're very open about this, and this
Yeah.
trauma was something that really changed your life. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we were living down in South Africa, and I was my wife and I were working as facilitators for underprivileged youth in this program in South Africa, and so we were out living on a nature reserve, and it was only 2 weeks after we had arrived there, and so just to sort of set the lay of the land, there's kind of four buildings in an L shape. So at the top end of the L, you have like the dining hall where all the students are. Then you have like the students' dormitory, and the next one over is like the students' sort of wash facility and washrooms and stuff. And then tucked off to the side on the bottom end of the L is where the instructor's cabin, kind of tucked away in the bushes. And so it was evening. Everyone's in the dining hall eating, having dinner. I'd finished my dinner early. And I was walking back to the instructor's cabin. So it's maybe, 150, 200 feet kind of thing. It's nighttime. It's dark out. We're out in a nature reserve, so there isn't like a lot of light out there. There's a few, but they try to keep it not too much because, they don't want to disturb the natural habitat too much. Anyways, the cabin door was slightly ajar when I was walking back there. And it didn't really tweak anything in my brain at that point in time, and it should have. But when I opened the door, there was three men inside the cabin. And they were sitting around the table and eating what's known as rusks, so this hard biscuit that they eat in South Africa, and drinking rooibos tea. And still something didn't quite twig in my brain because I looked at one of their faces and like, oh, I recognize you, and it was one of the Rangers, but he was not in uniform. And it's crazy because the first thought that went through my head was like, was there something wrong in the cabin? Had they come to fix it? And I was like, I don't remember asking them to come fix
So
something.
you were
But
kind of you were sort of innocent about
right,
it.
right. It was a Monday, and maybe someone on the weekend had reported an issue. But it should have occurred to me. Always hindsight's 2020, right? Like,
Sure,
should have
of
should have occurred
course.
to me that something was really wrong here. I didn't see the fourth guy, and he was outside the cabin. He must have been keeping watch and sort of hiding in the dark. And he hit me across the head with a rock, and so that was when all of a sudden I realized like something's really wrong with the situation. And then now my brain's trying to process like everything that's going on. Of course, I'm now stunned because it's been cracked across the skull with a rock. And you know, the part that really sticks out to me was like him grabbing my shirt. So I was wearing a collared golf shirt, and him grabbing like the scruff of that shirt with one hand and swinging this rock at my face with the other hand.
Oh my God.
And he had a smile on his face while he was doing this. And so that, you know, and of course I get hit the second time, and now I'm like blood is pouring down my face, and I'm concussed and I'm stunned, and I'm like, what, you know, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And really, I think at that point it's just like, you know, primal instincts kind of kicking in. But I've stumbled, I've fallen to the ground, and they basically just jumped on me like and started kicking and boot stomping me, and like it was their intention to beat me to death. Like this wasn't just we're gonna rough you up a little bit. It was like
Were they trying to rob you? What was their
that,
goal?
that was a part of it, but there was kind of more to it, and there's kind of a cultural aspect to it, because they'd beaten the night before they'd beaten a guy to death as well, and so they'd kind of, the ranger must have let them into the reserve, and I don't know how they found out that you know, a couple of white people were out there, because this was racially motivated. Like it had nothing to do with me personally, but it was racially motivated. So I say that like I was a representation of something they felt had historically oppressed them, and whether or not that's true, I mean, I'm from Canada, I'm not from South Africa. That was the situation I was in, and so. You know, I am like pretty big and strong, and you know, I wasn't unconscious. I was obviously taking a beating, but and I was stunned, and it's dark, and you know, and I'm hollering for help, and nobody's coming because they can't hear me. They're 100, you know, a couple hundred feet away in this building where everyone's making noise and having a good old time and stuff, and but I was able to kind of get to my, like, kind of onto my hands and my feet and sort of stumble, crawl, and kind of make this beeline for the dining hall, and why they didn't chase me, I don't know. They could have. They didn't, because it wasn't like I was moving quickly. I was barely walking in a straight line, you know, kind of thing. And then, yeah, they also had knives, but they didn't stab me at that time either, which I'm really glad for, you know. So,
Yeah. But
yeah,
what a thing to go through. Oh my gosh.
yeah. So
That's
it was just a really, it was a rough night. Um,
yeah, to say the least. And it triggered something in you from
yeah,
that point, which I would imagine we would all feel that way. And from that point on, that's sort of when you began to eat out of emotions and try to kind of
yeah.
suppress I guess, the fear, the anger. There's probably so many emotions that go with something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed emotions, and like in the time that we continued to live in South Africa, there's a number of other incidents that happened, and kind of what happens is trauma layers on trauma, and you move more and more into sort of this primal sort of survival state of being. Like you can, like it was like I could function in day to day life as though nothing was wrong because I was kind of dissociating, but my entire like nervous system is triggered, and we're on high alert all the time, always looking where we're going, always looking over our shoulders. Like it was really, you know, it's very rough down there. It's quite a violent country,
Wow,
and
I give you credit for staying. I don't know if I would have, to be honest with you, after something like that.
I think for us it was like we were like, they're not going to win. You know, they don't get to beat us. You know,
That's a
that
good
kind of
way to
thing.
look at it. Hmm.
Um,
Sure.
but yeah, eventually, like I mean, I was extremely angry a lot of the time. And you know, I say I didn't set out to become a binge eating food addict, but it's basically what happened. Is food was a tool for me. It was, you know, I didn't like what I was feeling. I could eat food and kind of soothe and medicate with it. And at that time, I didn't really have, like, I was aware about sort of healthy eating and being fit because I was fit and active and reasonably athletic, but I didn't really have any awareness, any EQ around this or emotional intelligence
Yes.
around this.
And you know, I always have said I think food addiction is one of the hardest addictions because you can say don't drink alcohol or
Yeah.
don't do drugs. So you don't need those to survive. You need food to survive. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to overcome a food addiction because we need it to survive. You can't just cut it off.
Yeah.
And so that is a tough problem. So you worked with a coach, and how many years did it take you to finally lose the weight, but not just lose the weight, change your mind and change the way you felt about food?
Yeah, well, I had a couple of, I tried coaching like before. So there's probably about a 6 year, because obviously we're condensing this into quite a nutshell, but there's about a 6 year span where I was really like yo-yo dieting, struggling with my weight. I tried a lot of extreme methods to lose weight, because when we're in that state, the idea is I want to lose this weight as quickly as possible because it's the source of all of my unhappiness. When the truth is, the extra weight and the binge eating and the food addiction was really the symptom of something deeper that was going on. And so after about 6 years of struggling, and I'd hired a few coaches, And it really didn't work because they didn't understand what was going on, and I didn't really understand the type of help that I needed.
Yeah, sure.
That's
Here's a diet. Follow the diet. I mean, we can look that up on the internet. That's
yeah,
not
yeah,
right. I mean, it's more
yeah.
than that. For most people, it is.
Yeah, and so and I had this idea like if I just lose the weight, I'll be happy. But so nobody really talked to me, especially being male, and the male part of the fitness industry. Like it's starting to get talked about more now, but it certainly wasn't back then. Go back 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Like this stuff wasn't talked about. So when I hired this coach about a little over 4 years ago, and he started working with me on self-love and self-compassion. And that was a very unusual thing for a male coach working with a male client to be speaking about these things, at least in my world. And so at first I was quite almost like taken aback because my expectation was that he was going to, shame me, guilt me, tell me I was a loser, tell me I was a failure, all these sorts of things. Because I'd also spent time in the supplement industry. Like I have a chemistry background and sort of connected to the bodybuilding industry and seeing all the body dysmorphia and orthorexia in that industry. So that had really colored my idea around fitness. And I think still a lot of people, their ideas around fitness are really colored by what they see on, say, Instagram or social media, like these fitness models and stuff. That's not the way that ordinary people go about getting healthy and fit.
Yes, it's an extreme, and not
It
many
is.
people can do that, even if they want to do that.
Well, it's not even enjoyable. Like that's the
Yeah,
truth. It's
it's
not.
really your life. It's your entire life. I mean, most people have
Absolutely.
jobs and children and other responsibilities and can't go to that extreme.
Yeah.
That's very difficult.
So it was really this idea of learning how to cultivate self-compassion. And so that was the thing is you think, well, how do I learn how to do that? Because it's never nothing I'd ever done before. And again, it's not really talked about by men. And so I say it actually started with something as simple as brushing my teeth. And you would think, well, boy, that's awfully small. Because people want to ask the question, well, what did you do to lose 100 pounds? And in that question, kind of what they're looking for is, can you give me a template? Can you like just give me an action plan here, and I'll just follow whatever it was that you did. But the truth is, everyone out there is an individual. You have different life circumstances, different life experiences. The fundamental principles of a healthy lifestyle are relatively simple, but how you make them work for you in your lifestyle is going to look different than how I did it. You
So,
know.
what do you mean by brushing your teeth?
So brushing your teeth is an act of self-care. It's actually a little micro investment in your future health. You could call it like a little payment into your health pension. So by doing that, because I was operating from this place of belief that I'm unworthy of self-love, that I'm less than, that I'm a failure, that I'm a loser, and all this kind of thing. And really, I was very like I almost like I loathed my body. So now the opposite of that belief is to actually show myself a little bit of care. Brushing my teeth is an act of self-care. So we wonder, how do we change a belief that we hold about ourselves that maybe we've held for many, many years? And it's like with a small action that's contrary to that belief. So brushing my teeth is contrary to the belief that I'm not worthy or not deserving of self-love and self-care. And then you can build on that. And I think that's the really important thing that people need to understand is we still are really get stuck in this all or nothing, go big or go home mentality that does not serve us or help us. It's this, we have that desire because, we just want to get it over with, as though I just want to get this over with and go back to living my life.
Yeah.
And yeah,
As if it ends, really. It never
right,
really ends. I mean, you
right.
continue to live. You have to continue to make steps to improve yourself and steps towards self-care.
Yeah. Well, I like the quote that like if your diet has an expiry date, so do your results.
That's really good. I like
Yeah.
that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
So
the truth. Yeah.
let's fast forward a little bit to where we are today, and you actually used your experience to
Yeah.
help other people, which I love so much. Tell us what you do.
So I have a company called Freedom Nutrition Coaching, and that name actually came from a client who said to me, "I don't want to live in nutrition prison anymore." And I loved it. I was like, you've really captured what so many people struggle with. They may not use those words, but like this whole idea around trying to lose weight and going on a diet, like they feel like they're imprisoned and being put in a straitjacket. And so I realized, because of my own struggles, we have to do something different if we're genuinely going to help people. And so I focus on what I call brain-driven weight loss. So we want to recognize that if we want to lose weight permanently, we have to change how we live permanently. Now, in order to do that, we actually have to change the driver of our behavior, and the brain is what drives our behavior, whether that's our habits, our psychology, our mindset, our beliefs, our sense of identity, all of these things, and even the environment that we live in. get our brain to direct our behavior. And so when we focus on this, because the brain has this really cool property called neuroplasticity, that's the brain's ability to rewire itself. That's how we learn. It's really cool. So when you think about it, like living a healthy lifestyle is kind of like learning a new skill set, acquiring new tools. And once you acquire these tools, they're yours. So I have a program called Lifestyle 180. And what we do in this program is we essentially help the individual reverse engineer their own healthy lifestyle. Now, that's really, really important. And here's why. If I just hand you a bunch of rules to follow, and they're my rules that I developed for my life and say, because it worked for me, it should work for you. Well, the moment those rules are taken away, you go back to whatever your default behavior pattern was. So in order to help somebody create permanent transformation, we now actually have to empower the individual. So you have to take onus or take responsibility. So let's say we'll start with a basic principle. I've got one I call EMS, eliminate mindless snacking. Now, I say, I want you to take this principle and try to put that into your life. And while you're trying to implement it, day by day, I want you to figure out what works for you and what doesn't and what triggers you. So from there, we're going to learn and we're going to shape and we're going to adjust this practice to suit what works for you. Because ultimately, at the end of our working together, I want you to have your own lifestyle built that you shaped, that you crafted. And so now when I stop working with you because our work is done, you don't fall back into old behavior patterns. You've created a lifestyle that you yourself enjoy and love.
It can be difficult for people because I'm thinking
Yeah.
about my background. I'm Italian, and
Yeah.
food was just a central part of our lives. And it was part of, we were taught kind of emotional eating. Oh, you did well on a test. We're going to go out to eat, or you
Absolutely.
won the softball game. Let's go get an ice cream cone. I mean, that's typical American families.
Yeah.
Food is a celebration, but it also becomes a crutch in times when
Yes.
you
Yeah.
feel you're upset. You've seen people eat just because they're sad or they're unhappy or even out of boredom. It is attached to so many emotions. So
Yeah.
how do you actually begin to drill down on that and start to
Yeah.
break that cycle that's so ingrained in us?
Well, we have to have a reason to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable. That's the truth. So weight loss itself is an uncomfortable process. Why? Because we're actually going against our biology. So our biology is such that our body, I say we have a famine biology. So our body wants to store fat. It wants to because that's what kept human beings alive through thousands of years of not having food security. Like we didn't have fridges, I don't know, even 100 years ago, lots of people didn't have fridges. So we did not have food security. So our way of surviving was to store fat for periods of time when there wasn't food available. So that's our biology has not changed, but now we live in a 24/7 feast world where
Yeah.
right,
Food is everywhere.
it's
Yeah.
everywhere and
Whenever you want it.
we're told we're encouraged, in fact we're almost like manipulated into eating all the time. Like snacking was never a thing a few hundred years ago. It wasn't a thing. You didn't have enough food to like snack on.
Oh,
You,
yeah.
you just
That's
ate
true.
you ate at like a set meal time. And it was like, I mean, heck, I remember even growing up, like, oh, you're hungry? Cool. Dinner's in 2 hours. Like,
Just wait. Yeah.
that's how it was.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, like, you won't ever find me say food is just fuel because it's not. You're right. It is social, it is cultural, there's history, there's all these other aspects to it that can be a good thing. But the problem is when it starts to become the only solution to any time we feel anything uncomfortable. That's a slippery slope.
Yeah. And do you advise taking it one step at a time? I've interviewed people before on this, nutritionists and so forth. And many times they say one of the biggest mistakes is people try to I'm changing my entire life. That's it. I'm eating celery and carrots and never again having an ice cream cone. And that just doesn't work. I mean,
No.
let's face it. But everyone wants to do it that way, as you say, because they want
Yeah.
immediate results. It didn't take you a month to gain 30 pounds. It's not going to take you a month to lose 30 pounds.
Yeah,
So you
weight
have
loss is
to
not
be
Amazon Prime.
realistic. Yes, right. Exactly. It's not Amazon Prime. I like that. So when you work with people, I'm assuming you get their background, you get their history,
Absolutely.
and you find out what one step could you do this week or this month. Is that correct?
Yeah, now it's going to look a little bit individual for people, right? But we could say like the fundamental principles of a healthy lifestyle are really not overly complex. Now, we sometimes want to make it complicated because we sort of equate complexity to this is probably going to work better and or faster or be easier. And the truth is the more complicated you make it, the more likely you are to fail. And you're going to fail sooner. But so I can explain from a brain perspective what happens when we make the decision, I am going to change my life. So we could call this the resolution mindset, because the most notable example of this is when New Year's comes around. And so yeah, so we a new year represents a fresh opportunity. So in our brain, we start to picture, I am going to make these changes, and when I make these changes, here's how I will look, and here's how I will feel, and here's how my life is better. Now, notice this doesn't actually have to do with a number on the scale. Like we a number on the scale is just a placeholder, right? It's a
Yes.
placeholder for a future that we think is waiting for us. So you want to understand, what is that future that you're picturing in your head. Now, your brain, when you create that picture, doesn't distinguish between subconscious and reality. So it starts to reward you with this brain chemical called dopamine, and dopamine makes our brain feel good. So that surge in dopamine feels like motivation. Now, what it really is biologically is it helps us overcome our fear of change, our natural resistance to change. That's the push that gets us started. But your brain can't keep you high all the time, because if it did, ordinary life would become depressing. So it dials the dopamine back after a couple of weeks, and we feel like we've lost motivation. When the truth is, we just had to get over the hump to get started, and now we need something bigger or deeper to keep us moving forward.
That is amazing. And so, how often do you work with your folks, and how long does it generally take? I'm sure it's different for everyone, but in just a, ballpark.
Well, in general, when people come to me, one, they've tried to lose weight a number of times, and they probably have 40 to 80 or even 100 pounds to lose. And so it's not a small amount of weight. If someone comes to me and says, I just want to lose the last 10 pounds, I go, I'm probably not the right coach for you.
Yeah. You've
So,
already done it though. And that's one thing that you can
yeah.
say you've done it. And they probably like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm probably going to be working with someone for 6 to 12 months, and that's some of my clients have stayed with me for 2 or 3 years, because losing weight is one piece of the puzzle, but keeping it off is the next piece of the puzzle. And so, like, one of my favorite clients, her name is Rhonda, and she's lost 50 pounds, and it took about 9 months at 60 years old for her to lose 50 pounds. But now, for the next 2 years, she's kept that weight off.
It's
So
easy to go back. Easy to go
yeah,
back if you let it slide. If you
yeah,
let those old habits or old emotional eating
yeah,
jump in once again. So by working with you as a coach, she's able to check in and
yeah.
just make sure that she's not going off the rails.
Well, here's the thing: life is going to keep throwing you curveballs.
Yeah,
Like we're
definitely.
all navigating uncharted waters every day, right? Because we only live one
Especially
day at a time.
lately, I
Yeah,
mean, this pandemic, none of us have lived through anything like this. So
yeah.
it's been crazy for people.
Well, it's been very emotionally distressing. You think about, like, how the news media is constantly propagating fear more than ever. Like, news media is always kind of put negative stuff out there because it draws our primal brain in. That's how you get eyeballs on it, right? You show negative things, it triggers a survival response. We got to look at that because it's a threat. That's what our brain does. But I've never seen, like, so much sort of negativity and fear being put forward, and so many people sort of being paralyzed by fear,
Yes,
in a sense.
yes, it can get depressing, really, to watch the news, especially over, when the pandemic first hit, and there was a lot to be afraid of. Let's
Sure.
face it, but it almost becomes like paralyzing. And what did people do? They were stuck at home,
Mm-hmm.
and they ate. And
Of
they
course.
ate the quarantine 15. We've all heard
Yeah.
of that. And then
Well, for,
that's something that's hard because then you kind of get stuck, and it's
yeah.
hard to lose that weight, as you said. And what happens is then you gain more and
Mhm.
more. And at a certain point, I don't know if you felt like this. I'm sure that it can feel overwhelming. Like, I have
It does.
50, 80, 100 pounds to lose now.
Mhm.
What do I do? That's tough.
Yeah. So I like to ask the question, well, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right.
Yeah.
So why I use that analogy so often, though, is because what people are trying to do is the equivalent of trying to swallow the elephant whole in
Yeah.
one bite, and you
Yes.
can't. So, but we have this idea that the magnitude. So, look, the problem is large in magnitude, right? Let's say if you have 50 or 100 pounds to lose, that's a pretty big challenge you're up against. But the solution does not have to match that in terms of magnitude. In other words, the solution does not have to be as big.
Yes. My husband always says, every day you get up, make it one day closer to your goal, whatever your goal is. And one of my goals right now is between the holiday season is to work out every day. Now, I don't mean
Yeah,
hard, core, crazy, sweaty. Some of those workouts are like
sure.
that, but I mean, play tennis one day, walk another day, do some sit ups another, move my body. every single
Yeah.
day, because between the over the holiday season, that's a tough time. People tend to put on weight. So I'm just
Well,
trying to
absolutely.
maintain
Yeah.
over the holidays. That's how
If
I'm
you
looking at
don't
it.
gain weight between now and the end of the year, you're ahead of most people
Yes,
because
exactly.
we're for the northern hemisphere, we're going into winter, it's getting darker, the days are getting shorter. That kind of makes us feel depressed as well. So we do just kind of want to eat and be indoors and be inactive. I live in
Sure.
Canada, and
Oh,
we get a pretty cold winter here,
yeah.
you
You
know.
want to get in your cocoon and just kind of
Yeah.
eat your warm, hot, heavy stuff, that's just when you feel like doing it. And I just read something. People put on several pounds oftentimes over the holidays, and often they'll keep maybe one or two of them. Then they do it again the following year and the following year. That's 20, 30. That's how it ends up. You look at yourself one day and go, what happened? It's
Yeah.
just that little, it just creeps up on you. So
Yeah.
we really need to try to keep it in check. And I love to work out and exercise, but when I say those words and people go, "Ew, exercise,"
Yeah.
move some way, even if it's walking,
Yeah.
something to get going.
Well, there's this idea that, yeah, again, propagated kind of by the fitness industry. And I don't mean to be picking on them in one sense, but like people who follow a fitness lifestyle tend to have a certain type of personality, and they're really passionate about this stuff. But the average person doesn't have the same degree of sort of feisty passion for this. And the truth is, if we go back to our biology would like us to move less. Why? Because it wants to conserve energy. Because our biology doesn't know that we live in a feast world. And so our biology is such that, hey, if I can, from the push of a button on my phone, get food delivered to my door and not have to move,
Yeah,
like
isn't
we've
that
won.
great? Yeah.
We've won the biological lottery. Like we've won food security for the rest of our
Yes.
life. So it's and yeah, the slow creep it just sort of comes up on us, and then we're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I'm 30 years older than I was. I'm not 20 anymore, and I'm 40 pounds heavier. What am I gonna do? And so this is why I like the idea of investing in like our health pension. So like every choice we make, every habit we develop is like a vote for the future we want to have, right? So every time you decide I'm not going to do something active, I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix and eat. That's a vote for the future that you want to have. And so when you think about it like that, because we think our small actions don't matter, but when in reality, like most of the weight gain happened because of small choices that were repeated.
That's a I love that you said that, because everything builds upon itself. So one
Yeah.
action, then the next action, and all of a sudden you are where you want to be or where you don't want to be, depending on what those actions are.
Yeah.
And we do have the control. Sometimes it feels as if there's an outside force
Yes.
sort of
Yep.
commanding us to do it this
Mm-hmm.
way, just because we always did it this way. We always,
Yep.
binged at night, or we always, sneak that donut at work, or whatever it is. And it's hard to break that when you've done it. But when we realize we have the control, there's something, so like the name of your business, freedom. There's freedom
Yeah.
attached to that. But for people to get to that point, it's not always easy.
Well, so here's another thing to sort of think about. If we want to do this, like I said, it's going to be uncomfortable to lose weight. So we kind of, but when we acknowledge that this is going to challenge me, it's going to be uncomfortable, it actually gets easier. So I think one of the things that really trips us up is when we expect it to be easy and we discover that it's hard. But if we expect it to be hard, we very often discover it's probably a bit easier than we were. It's not going to be the worst thing in the world. But if you want to do this, you need what I call an emotionally compelling reason. So because it's going to be uncomfortable, human beings are actually willing to be uncomfortable for something that they feel is worth it. And if you don't have a
Just about anything in life,
right,
raising good children. If you get an education, you had to give something up to get that. Anything in your life, you've had to give something up to get it. Let's face it.
yeah, yeah.
That's the way
So
it goes.
I'm a recovered food addict, but I still kind of have the brain of an addict. So people would see my story, they see the before and after, and they think that I must be, I don't know, on cruise control on an easy street. And in truth, like it's certainly a lot easier than it was 5 or 6 years ago. I can tell you that. But it doesn't mean I'm not challenged every day in one sense. And so, but I have a very good reason why I keep doing this. And for me, it's my son. I say, I do not want to be a sideline dad. I don't want to be on the couch saying, I'm sorry, daddy can't play with you because he can't get down on the floor. That's not going to be my future. So when it's a battle between, do I want to eat that chocolate bar or that bag of chips versus, because here's the kicker. Fat cell that keeps on giving, right?
Yeah.
Once you make a fat cell, it's yours for life. You can shrink it, you can empty it, but it's there always waiting to be refilled. That's that
Yes.
biological efficiency. And so because I've been obese, I have a bunch of fat cells in my body that might be small and empty, but the moment I start eating in like a massive calorie excess, boy, they'll mop all of that up.
Sure.
And it's crazy how fast I can regain weight. So I have to make uncomfortable choices every day. But I do it because I love getting on the floor and playing with my son. We have like a dedicated playtime every day where just him and I play together, you know.
Oh, that's so nice. And how old is he?
He is just over 8 months old.
Yeah. Well,
So
when you get a little older, I'm older than you. You start to think about not just you want to get on the floor and play. You want to be
yeah,
around for your kids and on the long
milestones.
haul. And when they
Yeah.
start to have kids, and you start to think that way, you want to be here, not just to play on the floor.
Well, here's the kicker. So I'm close to 40, which you probably say I'm still a spring chicken, but I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm
to
you
me.
know, but the thing is so my kid's gonna be 1 and I'm gonna be 40. My kid's gonna be 10, I'm gonna be 50.
Yeah.
You know, he's gonna be graduating, I'm close to 60.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to
That's
be like, oh, it's so nice you brought your grandpa to graduation.
exactly. Well, you have a good motivating factor. And I think for a lot of people, people love their kids and
Yeah.
they want to be around for their kids and they want to set an example. But as I said,
Yeah.
it is, very difficult to break those habits. But that's why we have people in the world like you who are helping people out to finally get to where they want to be. And again, what is the name of your company and where can people reach you?
So Freedom Nutrition Coaching. So it's freedomnutritioncoach.com is my website. I also run a podcast called Between the Before and After. I run it as a live broadcast as well. So anywhere you can find Freedom Nutrition Coaching, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook, you can catch a broadcast a couple times a week there. But really what it is so on social media, we see the before and after, but we don't actually see the story that takes place in between. And I really want to share people's stories so we understand the reality of what it's like to actually try to create change and transformation.
Oh yeah, you see a lot of somebody overweight and then you see them thin. What do they do to get
Yeah,
there? You don't want to just see the end. You want to see all the nitty gritty, dirty stuff in the middle,
yeah.
and it can be sometimes. And
The messy
it's not
middle.
always a straight line up.
Yeah.
It can be a roller coaster, which is tough. But I will put a link to your site in the show notes,
Awesome.
and
Yeah.
I thank you so much for sharing such wonderful, great tips, and your knowledge is vast on this subject, and I really do appreciate that. And it's great that you're doing this for your son and your wife, I know, who
Absolutely. Yeah.
stuck with you the entire way, who was a great
Yep.
support for you, which is always a good thing to have. So thank you again, Jonathan McClernand, emotional eating weight loss coach. We thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, you take care, and thank you for joining me for Living Well with Robin Stoloff, and we'll see you next time.